Most earthquakes are over before you finish standing up. 30 seconds. Forte. A minute if it's a bad one. Long enough to scare you. Not long enough to do anything about it. You grab a door frame. The dishes rattle. Somebody laughs. And then it's done, and you go back to what you were doing on the evening of Friday, March 27th, 1964. The ground under Anchorage, Alaska started moving at 36 minutes past 5, and it kept moving for about 4.5 minutes. Sit with that number, because it's the whole thing. 4.5 minutes is long enough to run out of a building. Get to the street. Watch the street start doing the same thing the building was doing, and still have 2 minutes left with nowhere to go. It's long enough to use up every single thing a person knows how to do in an earthquake, and then stand there with nothing left to try. It's long enough for the ground under a neighborhood to come apart and carry the houses on top of it toward the water. People who lived through it will tell you the shaking was bad. Then they'll tell you the part that actually stayed with them, which is that they could not tell when it was going to end, and it kept pretending to. You're 16 years old. You're working the last shift before the holiday weekend at a store on 4th Avenue in downtown Anchorage. Your mother and your brother and your sister are 4 miles west of you, in a house on a bluff over the water. The clock behind the register says 5:35. The bell over the door has a particular sound, and you've been hearing it since 11 o'clock this morning. It's brass, about the size of a small pear, screwed to a strip of spring steel on the inside of the door frame, and it doesn't ring so much as clatter. 2 notes, close together, one going up. Everybody who comes in sets it off, and everybody who leaves sets it off again. So it's rung 400 times today, and by 2 in the afternoon, you stopped hearing it, the way you stop hearing a clock. You'd know it anywhere. You will know it for the rest of your life. The store closes at 6 because of Good Friday, and everybody in Anchorage seems to have remembered that around 4 o'clock, it's been steady since then. A line of people who all need one more thing before 3 days of everything being shut. None of them wanting to be here. All of them pleasant about it. In that clipped way, people are pleasant when they're in a hurry. A woman buys thread and 2 zippers. A man buys batteries. And there's a joke in that later, and nobody knows it yet. You're 16 and you work Fridays and Saturdays. And this is a half day, and you've got $4 and change coming for it. Outside the front windows, 4th Avenue is doing what it does at the end of March. The snow is still down, not the good snow. March snow, packed hard and gray along the curbs where the plows pushed it in February. Sunk in on itself, ice at the bottom and gravel on top. It melts a little in the afternoon and locks up again at night. And it's been doing that for 2 weeks, and it'll do it for 2 more. The sidewalks are wet in the middle and slick at the edges, and the light is still up. That's the thing about this time of year here. And you never quite get used to it, no matter how many springs you've had. In December, it's dark at 3 in the afternoon, and you go to school in the dark and come home in the dark, and it presses on you. Then February turns over into March, and the sun comes back so fast it's almost rude. By the end of this month, you've got light past 7 in the evening. So it's 5:35, and it's bright out. Not warm, bright. The mountains east of town have that flat evening color on them. Traffic on 4th is thin, because the offices let out early and the bars haven't filled up yet. And there's that half-hour downtown where the street belongs to nobody. Anchorage is not an old place. You know this without ever having thought about it. The way you know how far it is to your own house. Most of what you can see out this window went up after the war. The buildings are new. The streets are new. And the whole town has the look of a place that got built fast because a lot of people showed up at once. Your school is new. The hospital is new. Alaska has been a state for 5 years. You were 11 when it happened, and they let the kids out early, and there were flags on 4th Avenue. And your father said something at supper about how it wouldn't change anything. And you remember him saying it because your mother disagreed with him out loud, which she doesn't often do. 45,000 people live here now. That's the number they say. It was less than half that when you were small. The floor of the store is wood, and it creaks in 3 places, and you know all 3. Behind the register is a clock. Round, black rim, the kind that's in every store and every classroom in America. In 1964, it says 5:35. Your manager is at the far end of the counter with the cash drawer open, counting down early because he wants out of here at 6 sharp. He's about 50. He's been in Anchorage since before the war. He counts money with his lips still and his chin moving. And you've never told him you noticed. And you're working on the display case? That's the thing you were told about on your first day and have been told about since. Glass case at the end of the counter. 3 shelves. Sliding glass door on the backside. And it holds the small, expensive things. Watches. A few pieces of jewelry. 2 cameras. The glass is nothing special. It's just glass. But the whole front is 1 pane with no frame across the middle. And it costs something to put in. And you were told the first week that if anything happens to that case, it comes out of somebody's pay. Nobody ever said whose. So what you're doing at 5:35 in the afternoon, hip against the counter, head tipped down, is taking the watches off the middle shelf, 1 at a time, wiping the shelf with a cloth, and setting them back in a straight row. It's the last job of the day. It's a job that exists so you have a job to be doing when there are no customers. You've done it 200 times. You're wearing flats. You want that on the record, because you're going to be thinking about it later. There's a pair of boots at your house. Rubber. Lined. Up over the ankle. And they're what a person wears in Anchorage in March. And you own them, and they fit, and they're sitting by the back door where you left them this morning. You didn't wear them because it was bright out, and because they're ugly, and because you're 16, and you were going to be indoors all day anyway. Your mother said something about it on your way out. 4 words at most. The kind of thing a mother says while she's doing something else. And you said the thing you say back. And you went. Your house is out in Turnagain Heights, 4 miles west of where you're standing, past the edge of downtown, on the bluff above Knickar. Newer houses out there. Good ones. Yours isn't fancy, but it has a window that faces the water. And on a clear evening you can see across the inlet to the mountains on the other side. And, in summer, the light comes in that window until 10 at night. Your mother is home right now. Your brother is 9, and your sister is 4, and they're home too. And there's no school today. And your mother has had both of them indoors since breakfast. And you know exactly what her voice is going to sound like when you walk in. Your father works down by Ship Creek. He comes home when he comes home. That's the whole layout of your life. At 5:35 in the afternoon on the 27th of March, a woman comes in and the bell clatters. She's after a card, and there aren't any good ones left. And she takes one anyway and says something about how it's the thought. You ring her up. 95 cents. The bell clatters again on her way out. The door swings shut and settle. Your manager finishes a stack of bills, squares them on the counter, pushes them to one side. Then he starts to say something to you. He says your name first, the way he does when he's going to ask for one more thing before you leave. And he gets about 4 words into it. That's where it is. The ground moves here. It moves all the time. Anchorage sits on top of a piece of the world that's actively coming apart. And everybody who lives here has felt an earthquake. And most people have felt a dozen, a couple times a year. One comes through big enough to notice. Cups move. A door swings. You look up. Somebody says, well, and it's over. And you go back to your coffee. There was one about 6 weeks ago that knocked a jar off a shelf at your house, and your mother swept it up and nobody mentioned it again. So when the floor starts moving at 36 minutes past 5, your body does nothing at all. It isn't courage. It's filing. Something in you takes the sensation, checks it against every other time this has happened, finds the match, and puts it away as ordinary. That takes about 1/4 of a second, and you aren't involved in it. You keep hold of the watch you're holding. Your manager stops mid-sentence. He doesn't jump, and he doesn't grab anything. He stops talking, and his hand stays flat on the stack of bills, and his head comes up about 1 inch. That's the entire reaction of a grown man in Anchorage, Alaska, to the beginning of the second largest earthquake ever recorded on this planet. He stops talking and he lifts his chin. The floor is going in a slow roll. It comes up under the balls of your feet, moves through, goes away, and then another one. The 2 of them about a second apart. The hanging lights start to swing. There are 4 of them down the length of the store on chains. And they don't all swing together, which is something you notice without knowing why you're noticing it. On the second shelf of the display case, the watches slide. They move maybe 1/4 inch, all of them at once, in the same direction, and the crystals catch the light when they do it. You put your hand flat on the glass. That's your first move of the whole afternoon, and it has nothing to do with your safety. You put your hand on the case because the case is your job and the watches are sliding. And if something falls off a shelf, you're the one who picks it up. There's a sound now underneath everything. You've heard the small ones plenty of times and they don't have this. It's low, and it isn't coming from any direction. It isn't the building. The building has its own noises, and they're starting up too. A creak in the ceiling joists and a rattle somewhere at the back. And this runs underneath those. It's the ground. Somewhere down the store, a woman says, "Oh," 1 syllable, the way you'd say it if you dropped something. Somebody else laughs. There are maybe 5 customers in here, and one of them laughs. And it's a real laugh. He's got one hand on a shelf post, and he says something to the man next to him about how, "Here we go." Your manager still hasn't moved. He's looking up at the ceiling, not scanning it, looking at one spot, up and to the left. where the light fixture chain is fastened, and his face has nothing on it. Here's the part you'll go over later, when you have years to go over it in. Nobody in the store stood up. Nobody left. Nobody got under anything. 5 customers and 2 employees, and every one of us stayed exactly where we were. Because we've all done this before. And the way you do it is you wait, and it passes. And then it's a thing that happened. You wait. 10 seconds in, the roll gets bigger. It's easier to feel in your knees now than in your feet. And you shift your weight without deciding to, the way you do on a boat. The watches slide again, farther, and one goes over on its face. 12 seconds. 13. Then something changes. And it isn't the strength. The sound changes. It comes up in pitch, and it gets closer. And it stops being under the room and starts being in it. And every hard thing in the store begins to make noise at the same time. The glass in the front windows, the register drawer, something metal at the back that hasn't made a sound all day. That's the moment. Your manager's head comes down and around, and he looks at you across 12 feet of countertop. And what's on his face is a question he doesn't have a word for. He's been in this town since before the war. He's never heard it do that before. Everything you know about earthquakes gets used up in about 20 seconds. That's the whole inventory. It isn't long. Get away from the windows. Get under something or stand in a doorway. Don't run outside, because things come off building. Hold onto something solid. That's it. That's what a person has. Your manager comes around the end of the counter saying, "Get away from the glass." And he says it twice. And the second time, he's louder than you've ever heard him. You go. The front of this store is one long window from the floor up, and you've stood in front of it every Friday for a year. And you cover the 12 feet away from it faster than you knew you could move. Then you're in the middle of the store between 2 shelf runs with both hands on a post. And that's the last decision you're going to get to make for a while. Because now there's nothing left to do. You did the whole list. It took 20 seconds. The floor is still going. And it's going harder than when you started. And you're standing there holding a post with both arms, like somebody waiting for a bus. The floor isn't rolling anymore. Rolling was the first part. And rolling you can stand on. What it's doing now is different. And there isn't a good word for it, because most people never feel it. It goes sideways and comes back. Hard. Fast. On no beat you can catch. Left. Then a shorter one. Then 2 quick ones. Then something that isn't left or right at all and just drops out from under your heels for a fraction of a second. Your legs try to correct, and they can't. Because by the time your legs have understood the last one, the next 2 have already happened. Here's what that feels like. And it's the part that gets left out. You don't fall. You'd think you fall. You don't. You're holding a post, and your feet are on the floor, and they stay on the floor. And what happens instead is that your body spends the entire time about half a second behind the room, correcting for something that already ended, and never once catching up. You can't stand up, and you aren't falling down. There's no name for that. Nobody's body is built to be in that state, and yours is in it now, and it stays in it for 4 more minutes. Your arms are what's holding you. Both of them, locked around a shelf post that's 4 inches of painted steel. Fingers laced on the far side. And at some point, you become aware that you're pulling on it hard enough to hurt. The post moves too. That's a bad thing to learn. The noise is the next thing. You can't hear any of it separately. It's all at once, from every direction. And the closest thing in your life is standing beside a freight train. Except a freight train is in one place, and this isn't. The building is loud. The ceiling is loud, in a way a ceiling should never be. A long, grinding creak that runs the length of the store and comes back. The shelves are loud. Everything metal in here is ringing against everything else metal. And 100 small, hard objects rattling in place is somehow worse than the sound of them falling. And the low one is underneath all of it. The ground one. And it hasn't stopped since it started, and it's gotten bigger. Then the glass. Here's what nobody tells you about a big pane of glass. And you find it out at 5:37 in the afternoon, standing 18 feet away from one. Glass bends first. That front window is a single sheet, maybe 8 feet by 6, set in a metal frame. And the wall it's mounted in is moving. The glass goes with it. You can see it happen. The reflection of the street lies across that pane. The gray snow and the buildings on the other side of 4th. And the reflection warps and comes back and warps the other way. And it's doing what water does. It makes a sound while it does it, not a crack. A groan. High up, right at the top of what you can hear. It bends, maybe 4 times. Then it lets go, and it doesn't burst into a spray, the way a window does when a rock goes through it. It comes down in whole pieces. Big uns, the way a sheet of ice slides off a roof. And they hit the sidewalk out front, and that sound gets in among everything else. Cold comes through the hole. You're facing the front of the store when it happens. So, past the empty frame, you get about a second of 4th Avenue. There's a car stopped in the middle of the street. Not parked, stopped. At an angle, bouncing on its springs like somebody's standing on the bumper. 2 people are on the sidewalk on the far side, down on all 4s. Hands flat. That's your one look. And then you're not looking at the street anymore. Because the display case goes 12 feet from you, over on its face. The whole thing. And the pane in the front of it hits the wood floor and comes apart, and everything on all 3 shelves goes with it. You hear it separately from everything else. You have no idea how. There's more noise in this room than you've ever been inside of, and you hear that case go down like it was the only thing in the world. And what you feel about it is nothing. It arrives as a fact and sits there. The case is down. The glass is out of it. The watches are on the floor. You don't have one thought about your pay, or whose fault it is, or the 200 times you wiped that shelf. You'll have all of those thoughts later. In bed. For years. Right now it's just a thing you heard. Filed next to the ceiling, and the window, and the noise. And none of it means anything. Because your entire mind is on your arms, and the post, and the floor. Your manager is on the floor, about 8 feet away. He didn't fall. He went down on purpose. One knee, and then both. With a hand on the base of a shelf run. He's looking at you. He doesn't say anything. There's no sound a person could make in here that would carry 8 feet. The lights are off. You don't know when that happened. Somewhere in the last 20 seconds, The 4 hanging fixtures went out, and you didn't see it, and you didn't hear it, and you can't place it at all. The store is lit by the hole where the front window was. And that's a different light entirely. Gray and flat, and coming in low from the west. Somewhere behind you, a woman is saying the same word over and over. It isn't a scream. It's a small, flat sound with no air behind it, and she's saying it on every breath. And over the top of all of it, over the ceiling and the shelves and the ground, from 12 feet away by the front door, a brass bell is going off its head on a strip of spring steel. 2 notes, close together, one going up. Nobody has come in. Nobody has gone out. It just keeps ringing. It starts to let up. You feel it in your arms first, because your arms have been the only thing keeping you upright, and they're the first to notice they aren't working as hard. Then the noise comes down. The ceiling quiets first. That long grind up in the joists thins out and stops. And once it's gone, you realize how much of everything it was. The shelves keep going, but it's smaller, more chatter than bang. The floor is still moving, but it's rolling again. That slow, easy lift under the balls of your feet, and rolling you can stand on. You're standing on it. You let go of the post with one hand. That's a bigger thing than it sounds like. That's your body making a call, deciding this is over. And it makes the call before you do. You get one hand off the steel and flex it, and it doesn't want to open all the way. Behind you, the woman stops saying her word. Your manager gets a foot under himself. He's up on one knee with a hand on the shelf base, and he lifts his head and looks toward the front of the store. And you can see him running the same arithmetic you're running, which is that it's smaller. It's smaller than it was. It's going. He says something. You can hear him. That's how far the noise has dropped in 4 seconds. That a man on the floor 8 feet away can say a word and you can hear it. And the word is okay. And it isn't a question, and it isn't an answer. It's the sound a person makes when a thing is over. He starts to stand up. 3 or 4 seconds. That's the whole gap. 3 or 4 seconds where the store is quiet enough to hear a bell ring. And a man gets up off the floor, and you take one hand off a post and open and close it. Somebody laughs again. Same man. Or a different one. It's short, and there's nothing behind it. Then it comes back. It comes back bigger than anything in the first minute. There's no build. It doesn't work up to it. 1 second, the floor is rolling, and a man is standing up. And the next second, the whole building takes a hit like something ran into it. And your manager goes straight down onto his hands. Your hand is back on the post before you know you moved it. Everything that was rattling is now coming off. That's the difference, and it isn't subtle. The sound changes from things shaking to things landing. Behind you, a whole shelf run empties onto the floor in about 2 seconds. One long pour of hard objects. And then the shelf itself lets go of the wall at one end and comes down at an angle into something else. The floor isn't rolling, and it isn't shaking sideways. It's doing both. Out of step. And there's a third thing in it now that comes up through the soles of your feet as a hard knock. 1 or 2 a second. Like somebody under the building is hitting it with a beam. Your feet leave the floor. Not high. Not a jump. A knock comes up, and for a fraction of a second, there's no floor against your shoes. And then there is And it happens twice more in the next 30 seconds. And every time your stomach goes up into your chest, the way it does on a bad road. Behind the counter, the register goes over. The rest of the front glass comes out of the frame, and this time you don't hear it, because it isn't the loudest thing anymore. And your mind does something now that it didn't do in the first minute. In the first minute you were busy. There was a list, and you were on it. Get off the glass. Get to the post. Hold on. Your body had jobs. Now the jobs are done, and the earthquake is still here, and it's worse than it was. And your mind comes off the list and stands up and says the actual sentence for the first time. This isn't going to stop. That isn't a thought about dying. It's stranger and smaller than that, and it arrives with no fear attached at all. It's a piece of information, fully formed, in your own voice, completely calm. It just isn't going to stop. Some part of you had been running a clock this whole time without telling you. Every earthquake you've ever felt has ended, and that clock has been counting toward the end since the first second, the way it always does. And it ran out about 40 seconds ago, and the earthquake kept going. So the clock is broken, and with the clock gone, there's no shape to this. It has no length. There's no point out ahead of you where it's over, because you've already been past that point twice. Your manager is flat on the floor with his arms over his head. The woman has started her word again. The bell is still going out front by the empty window frame, ringing and ringing over the top of a building coming apart. And you're holding a steel post with both arms in a dark store on 4th Avenue. And it's been about a minute and 10 seconds. There are 3.5 minutes left. There's a point in this where you run out of being afraid. Not because you get brave. Fear is expensive, and your body has been paying for it for 1.5 minutes, and the account is empty. Somewhere past that first false stop, the thing in your chest that's been hammering since the window went just steps back. Your heart is still going. Your hands are still locked on the post. But the loud part of you goes quiet. And what's left is something you've never met before and won't have a name for until you're much older. You get calm. It's an awful kind of calm. It isn't peace. It's what's left when the alarm has been going long enough that nobody's answering it. And into that quiet comes the strangest stretch of your life. And it lasts about 100 seconds. Your mind, with nothing to do, starts looking at things. You look at the floor. There's a gap between 2 floorboards, about 8 inches from your left shoe, and it opens and closes, opens and closes, maybe a 1/4 inch each time. You watch that gap for 10 or 12 seconds, and you aren't thinking about the floor or the building or whether the floor is going to come apart. You're watching it the way you'd watch a bug. You look at your own hands on the post. Your knuckles are white, and there's a place where the paint has come off the steel under your right palm, and you can see the metal. Then you look up, above the front door where the transom is. There's a spot where the ceiling meets the wall, and there's a crack running through the plaster that was there this morning. You know it was there this morning because you've looked at that crack every day for a year. It's about 10 inches long and shaped like the state of Florida. And you and the girl who works Saturdays decided that a long time ago, and it was funny once. You're looking at it now, in the dark, in the middle of an earthquake. And here's the entire content of your mind. It's bigger. That's the whole thought. Florida is bigger. It's running farther out toward the door than it used to, and there's a new piece going up. Then you catch yourself counting something. You didn't decide to. You notice it already in progress. Somewhere in the teens, and you have no idea what you're counting. Not seconds. Just a number climbing in the back of your head. And when you notice it, it stops. And you feel oddly bad about that. Here's one you never tell anybody. You think about the bus. There's a bus you take home on Fridays. It comes past the corner at 6:10. And if you miss it, there isn't another for 40 minutes. Standing there with both arms around a post and a building coming down around you. Some completely intact clerk in the basement of your head files a note that you're going to miss the 6:10. That's the thought, not fear. A schedule. You'll be 40 years old before you can say that one out loud without feeling like something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Everybody who's ever been inside something long enough has thoughts like this, and none of them ever mention it. So, every one of them believes they were the only one. Then, the display case. 12 feet away, face down, glass out, watches everywhere. You look at it, and you get a thought you can't shake for the rest of your life. And the thought is that you're going to have to explain that. Not that it's ruined, that you're going to have to stand somewhere in a few days and account for it. There's a man on the floor 8 feet from you with his arms over his head. There's no electricity in this building or anywhere you can see. And a piece of your mind is drafting a sentence about a display case. Your mind isn't being ridiculous. It's doing the only thing left. There's a future somewhere on the other side of this, and it needs to be furnished with something. And the only furniture available is the ordinary kind. Now here's where your mother arrives. You want it noted that it took 1.5 minutes. You're going to carry that. You'll be 60, and you'll still be able to tell somebody the exact order the thoughts came in and how far down the list your family was. And it'll still put a small stone in you. But it comes, and when it comes, it isn't a thought at all. It's your whole body turning west. Turnagain Heights, 4 miles. A house on a bluff with a window facing the water. Your mother in the kitchen at 5:36 in the afternoon on a holiday with a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old who've been indoors since breakfast. And your mind refuses it. It won't build a picture. You try to see the kitchen and you can't see the kitchen. And it isn't that you see something terrible instead. You see nothing. It's a door that won't open, and you push on it twice and then leave it alone. Because you're holding a steel post in a dark store, and there's nothing on this earth you can do from here. That's the part you can't go. There are 4 miles of ground between you and that house. And the ground is the thing that's broken. So you put it down. Not bravely. You put it down the way you'd set down something too hot to hold. And it goes back to being a fact, you know, instead of a thing you're looking at. Then you look at the door. People are going to ask you about this later. People who weren't here. And they're going to ask why you didn't run outside. Here's the truth. And there's nothing noble in it. You'd have to let go. The door is 20 feet away, and it's 20 feet of floor moving in 3 directions. And across it, you'd have to take both arms off a steel post and be a person standing up. You haven't been able to stand up unassisted for 1 minute and 40 seconds. You tried a while ago without meaning to. Your legs aren't available. So you stay. It isn't a decision. It's an inventory, and the inventory says no. There's a smaller reason, and you'll only ever admit it to yourself. Nobody else is going. 5 customers and a manager, and none of them are moving. And there's something in a person that won't be the first one to break formation. Even here. And it holds you in place beside a shelf, run in the dark. Your manager lifts his head. He's been flat with his arms over him for a while. Now his head comes up and he's looking out through the empty window frame. And he isn't looking at the street. He's looking above it, at the buildings on the other side of 4th. His mouth is open a little. He looks at that for 4 or 5 seconds, then puts his head back down and gets both arms over it again, and says one word into the floor that you can't hear. The bell is still going. You've stopped hearing it. It's been ringing for 2 minutes, and it's gone the way it went by 2 o'clock this afternoon. Back to being part of the room. That's when you understand you're going to have to go outside. Not because it's safer. You have no idea whether it's safer. You understand it the dumb way. The way you'd understand you were going to be sick. The ceiling has been making a sound for the last 30 seconds that it wasn't making before. It isn't a grind anymore. It's separate cracks, spaced out, coming from different places. And each one is something that finished breaking. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You take one hand off the post. You get out the door on your hands and one knee, and part of the way you're crawling. You'll tell it later as walking. Everybody tells it as walking. What actually happens is you cross 20 feet of moving floor in a low crouch with one hand out front and one on the shelf ends. And near the door you go down onto a knee and there's glass there, and you get up off it fast. The door's already open. Somebody got out ahead of you, and it's standing wide with the bell going over it. You go under it and out, and your first thought on the sidewalk, honest to God, is that it's bright. You've been in the dark for 2 minutes, and it's 5:39 on the 27th of March, and the sun is still above the mountains to the west. And the light on 4th Avenue is that flat gold that comes late in the day this time of year. And it lands on all of it. Then the ground takes your feet out from under you. You go down on your left side on wet concrete, and you don't get up. Because you can't. And because down is where everybody is. That's the first thing you see from the sidewalk. Maybe 15 people out on this stretch of 4th, and not one of them upright. A man on all fours in the middle of the street. A woman sitting flat on the sidewalk with her back against a lamppost and both hands pressed to the concrete on either side of her. Palms down, like she's holding it. 2 people kneeling by a parked car with their hands on the running board. Nobody is running. Nobody in the whole length of this street is running. You can't run. That's the answer, and it's simple. To run, you have to be able to put your foot down where you meant to put it. And none of us can do that. So all of us are on the ground. And the ground is the problem. Now you see the street. There's snow along the curbs. Hard March, snow-packed gray, and flat white patches of it out across the ruts in the middle of the road. And the snow shows you what bare ground would have hidden. The street has waves in it. Waves. They come up out of the east end of 4th and run past you toward the west. And each one lifts the snow and the asphalt and everything sitting on it, passes underneath, and goes on. A foot high at the crest, maybe less, moving faster than a man can run. You watch one come. You're lying on your side, with your cheek about 8 inches off the concrete, which is exactly the wrong height to be, because from there you see it in profile. It comes up the street like something moving under a rug. It goes under the parked car, 40 feet from you, and the car goes up and comes down, and the springs bottom out, and it bounces twice. It goes under the sidewalk. You feel it arrive at your hip and travel the length of your body and leave at your shoulder. And your whole body rises maybe 8 inches and sets back down. Then the next one. There's no word for what that does to a person. The ground is the one thing that doesn't do this. Everything else in the world can move, and the ground does not. And that isn't a belief you hold. It's a thing your body was built on top of. And it's being taken out from under you at 5:39 in the afternoon while you lie on a sidewalk and watch it happen in good light. Then the cracks. There's one about 15 feet from you, running across the street at an angle, and it wasn't there a minute ago. Open, maybe 4 inches, black inside. You can see wet dirt down in it. You look at it for a second, and it closes. It comes together all along its length at once, and there's a sound when it does. A dull, heavy clap, and the dirty snow and gravel that fell in gets squeezed up out of it in a thin line. Then it opens again. Vita. That's the one that gets you. That's worse than anything the buildings have done. A crack that opens is a hole. A crack that closes is a mouth. And there's a mechanism under this street that's working. And it's working on its own schedule. And everything you were ever told about solid ground is standing there being wrong out loud. You get onto your knees and start moving away from it, going west. One hand on the wall of the building. Then you make yourself stop touching the building, because you look up. 4th Avenue is a canyon of 2- and 3-story storefronts, and every one of them is moving, not falling, moving, leaning, one way and then the other, out of time with each other. The building across the street goes right while the one beside it goes left. And there's a gap between them that opens and shuts, and you can see daylight through it. Cornices are coming off, chunks of brick facing, sheet metal, sign, brackets. Things are landing in the street the whole time you're watching, and every second or so you hear another one hit somewhere down the block. Glass is coming down everywhere. Whole sheets out of frames 3 floors up, turning over once in the air. A power pole about 100 feet down goes over. It doesn't snap, it leans slowly past the point where a thing can come back, and the lines on it come tight and pull the next pole toward it. And both of them go down into the street with the wires between them. The wires are dead. Nobody knows that yet. Everybody near them scrambles anyway. The car in the middle of the street, the one that was bouncing, isn't in the middle of the street anymore. It's traveled about 6 feet sideways with nobody in it. You look down, 4th toward the east end. You get one clear look, and it's a long one because the street is straight. And down there, 3 or 4 blocks east, the buildings on the north side of the avenue are lower than they were. You don't understand what you're looking at. There's no sense to make of it from here. The whole row is standing upright and intact. Signs on, windows in, and the roofline is wrong. It's going down. not falling down, going down evenly. The whole block of it together, like something being lowered. You're 16 years old, lying on a sidewalk on your hip in wet snow, watching a city block sink. And there's not one thing in your head that can make it mean anything. 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Somewhere behind you, back inside the store, a brass bell is still ringing. You start moving toward it, on your knees at first, then up in a crouch with a hand down on the sidewalk every few feet, going east along the storefronts on the south side. There's no reason for it. You're not going to help anybody. You don't have a thought in your head about being useful. You go because a person can't look at that and stay where they are. It takes you a long time to cover a block and a half. You go along with one shoulder near the buildings. Then remember what's coming off the buildings and move out toward the parked cars. And then a wave comes through and you're down again with your hands out. There's nowhere on this street that isn't moving. You get to about a block short of it and stop. And you sit yourself down on the ground with your back against a tire. Because your legs are done. Now you're close enough. Here's what 4th Avenue looks like at 3 minutes and 40 seconds into it. The north side of the street, running east from about where you are, has dropped. The whole thing, not one building, the block, the storefronts on that side are standing in a row, still connected to each other, still holding their shape. And the sidewalk in front of them is going down and taking them with it. The buildings aren't breaking apart. That's what you can't get your mind around. A building that falls comes apart. That's what falling is. And these aren't doing that. They're riding down on the ground they stand on, all together. And the ground is taking them lower than the street. There's a bar down there. You know the sign? A big one, mounted flat against the brick above the door. Name in block letters. Border of neon tubing around the edge. You've walked under that sign 100 times and never once read it without tipping your head back. It's coming down toward you. It comes down past the second-floor windows of the building beside it. It comes down past the roofline of the low building on the corner. And it keeps coming. And there's a moment, maybe 2 seconds long, where that sign is directly level with your eyes. You're sitting on the ground on the south side of 4th Avenue with your back against a car tire. And a bar sign that has always been 15 feet in the air is looking straight at you. The neon's dark. The letters are all there. Not a tube broken. Then it goes past. And down. And it keeps going. The street doesn't tear. That's what you'd expect, and it isn't what happens. The pavement on the north side is coming with the buildings, and the pavement in the middle of 4th is staying where it is. And between them, the asphalt does what asphalt doesn't do. It stretches. It comes up in a long ridge running the length of the block, and then it splits along the top of the ridge. And one side of the split goes down, and the other side stays. By the time it stops, there's a wall of dirt and broken road down the middle of 4th Avenue. 10 feet of it. More in places. You can't judge it. And you won't be able to judge it tomorrow either. There are cars on the low side, 3 or 4, parked at that curb an hour ago. And they went down with the block. And they're sitting at the bottom. Level, right side up. Still parked. One of them has its parking lights on. There's a man standing on the high side, 20 feet from you, at the edge. He walked up to it. He must have. He's standing with his toes about a foot back from where the pavement ends, looking down into it. Arms out from his sides for balance, while the ground under him keeps going. He doesn't move for a long time. That's the image. Out of everything in this whole afternoon, that's the one that comes back to you at odd hours for 50 years. A man in a work coat at the edge of a hole where a street was, arms out, looking down. Here's the part that will be hardest to explain to anybody who wasn't here. You aren't horrified. You should be. Everything about this is a thing to be horrified by, and you have no horror available. You spent it in the store. What you have instead is a flat, wide open, almost curious attention. You're watching this the way you'd watch a train switch tracks. Every detail arrives very clearly, and none of it lands anywhere. You notice the parking lights on that car. You notice that the neon border on the bar sign is unbroken. You notice that a window 3 floors up on the building behind the man still has a sale banner taped inside it. You'll learn later that everybody does this, and that there's a name for it, and that the name doesn't help. There's a woman down the block screaming a name, a man's name, 2 syllables, over and over from somewhere behind you and to the right. And she isn't moving from where she is. Nobody's going to her. Nobody can. Down on the low side, at the bottom, somebody comes out of one of the sunken storefronts. He climbs out through the empty front window frame, drops onto the sidewalk down there, and stands looking up at the wall of dirt between him and the rest of the street. He's got his hands on top of his head, fingers laced, elbows out. He turns all the way around. Once, slowly, standing at the bottom of a hole in the middle of downtown Anchorage with his hands on his head. And then he stops with his back to you and doesn't do anything else. That's when you finally think the sentence about your family. Not the door that wouldn't open in the store. The real one. If the ground can do this here, it can do this there. 4 miles west, on a bluff, over water. You get up. You have no plan, and there's no route, and the street is a wall of dirt. And you're 16 and wearing flats, and it's 4 miles. And you get up off the ground and you start. You get about 6 steps and the ground puts you down again. 4 minutes. It starts going away, and nobody on 4th Avenue moves. The waves come smaller. The hard knocking underneath thins out. The buildings stop leaning and go back to standing. Every person on this street felt that once already, back at the beginning, and got up and paid for it. So nobody gets up. You're on your hands and knees in the middle of 4th Avenue in the wet, 40 feet from the edge of the drop, and the ground is barely moving, and you stay exactly where you are with your palms flat. You're counting again and again, you don't know what. The man with his arms out at the edge is still standing there. He hasn't moved his feet. Then it's just rolling. Long, slow, easy swells. And after the last 2 minutes, they feel like nothing at all. Then those go too. And it stops. It stops so completely that you don't trust it for a good 10 seconds. Nobody stands up. 15 people on a block of 4th Avenue. All down, all still, all waiting for the same thing, which is for it to come back the way it came back before. 10 seconds. 15. And here's what you hear. Nothing. You've never heard nothing before. Not once in your life. There has always been something. The power is out across the whole city, and you don't know that yet. But you can hear it. There isn't one motor running anywhere in Anchorage. No refrigeration, hum, no fan, no transformer. Every constant low sound that's been under this town since before you can remember got switched off at the same instant. And what's left has a size to it. No cars, not one engine in any direction. And the snow takes the rest. There's still snow down on everything, and snow drinks sound, and it's drinking whatever's left. 4.5 minutes of the loudest thing that has ever happened in North America. And then a downtown street in a city of 45,000 people with nothing on it at all. You can hear yourself breathing. That's the loudest thing on 4th Avenue. Then the sounds come back, and they come back in an order. And you'll remember the order. First is something falling, way off east somewhere, a long clatter, and then a heavy, final sound. Nobody sees it. It just happens somewhere. That's the next while. Actually, things are still coming down all over this city, and they'll keep coming down for the next 20 minutes. One at a time, from every direction. And each one puts everybody's head up. Second is water. A hiss, steady, from down in the drop. A main opened up down there, and it's running. And you can hear it, because there's nothing else to hear. Third is an alarm. A fire bell. Somewhere south of you, going hard. There's no fire. There's no fire anywhere near this street, and there isn't going to be. And that bell is ringing because the box shook off the wall or the circuit shorted when the building moved. But nobody knows that at 5:41 in the afternoon, and a fire bell means one thing to everybody who hears it. And there's a small, ugly moment on that street where 15 people who just survived the ground think about fire. Fourth is a dog, somewhere north, barking hard and steady, on and on, not stopping. And fifth is people. Here's the thing about that. The first human sound after it stops isn't a scream. It's names all over downtown, from everywhere at once. People start calling names out loud, not screaming them, calling, that flat carrying tone you use across a parking lot. That's what a city sounds like at the end of it. A few hundred people standing in the wreck of a street, saying somebody's name into the air and waiting to hear an answer come back. The woman behind you is still on hers. She stopped screaming it, and now she's saying it, spaced out, every few seconds. A voice answers her from somewhere. Not the name she wants, just somebody saying, "I'm here. I'm all right." She keeps saying it anyway. Then people start getting up. One or two, then more. And everybody comes up slowly, and everybody puts a hand out to something first. And once they're up, you can see it in every one of them. This small hesitation, this checking, nobody trusts their own feet. You get up. Your legs are wrong, not hurt. They're doing the thing legs do after a long thing, loose in the joints, shaking a little, not feeling like they belong to the same person as the rest of you. You put a hand on the car fender and wait for about 4 seconds before you try a step. Your hands are worse. Your fingers won't open flat. You look down and they're curled and gray with dust and there's blood on the heel of the right one. And you don't remember doing that. And you'll find the glass in there tomorrow. Your ears are ringing. You stand in the middle of 4th Avenue and turn all the way around and look at the whole thing. Snow and dirt and glass across the pavement. A block of the north side, sitting 10 feet down, with the cars still parked in it. Power lines in the street. Brick facing down in front of half the storefronts. A wall of raw dirt where a street used to be. And the light is beautiful. It's coming in low and gold from the west, down the length of the avenue the way it does at this exact time of day in late March. Lying across all of it. And there's not a cloud anywhere. The mountains east of town are pink at the top. It's an ordinary, gorgeous Alaska evening in every direction above, about 10 feet off the ground. Nobody knows anything. That's what you have. At 5:41 in the afternoon. Not one person on this street knows how big it was, or where it was, or whether it hit the whole city or one block of it, or whether it's coming back. No radio, no telephone, no power, no official of any kind. You don't know that this was the second largest earthquake ever recorded anywhere in the world. You don't know that in the next few days, it'll be measured and argued over and eventually written down as magnitude 9.2. All you know is that it went on for 4.5 minutes and you counted things while it did. Down the block. The man at the edge finally moves. He takes 2 steps back from the drop, turns around, and starts walking west up the middle of 4th Avenue, past the wall of dirt, with his hands down at his sides. You start walking too, back toward the store first, because your coat's in there, and it's about to be 30 degrees. The front of the store is a hole with glass in the frame. The lights are off. The floor is a foot deep in things, and there's a shelf run down across the middle of it. You go in past the door, which is standing wide open, and that's when you notice it. The bell over the door isn't ringing. A like or a subscribe keeps these nights coming. And I want to know something. Has the ground ever moved under you? Even a little? Tell me where you were and what you did first. Your coat is under a shelf. You have to move part of a display run to get to it, and it takes longer than it should, because your hands aren't closing right. You get a grip with the heel of your palm and the side of your thumb, and drag the shelf over that way. When you get the coat out, it's full of glass dust, and you beat it against your leg twice and put it on anyway. It's a wool carcout, gray, and you've been embarrassed about it since Christmas because it's your mother's old one. You'll be wearing it for the next 36 hours. Your manager is standing in the middle of the store. He came in a minute after you did, and he hasn't gone anywhere since. Hands at his sides, looking at the floor of his own store in the dark. There are 40 years of Anchorage in that man, and none of it is doing him any good right now. You ask if he's okay. He says, yeah. Then he says it again. And the second one is more for him than for you. Then he starts checking people, and you can watch the switch happen in him. He goes around the store asking everybody the same question. There were 5 customers, and there are 5 customers, and the woman who is saying the one word over and over is sitting on an overturned crate near the back with her hands in her lap, and she says she's fine. Nobody in here is hurt. Cuts on hands. One man with a mark on his forehead, already coming up purple, 6 people were inside a building on 4th Avenue for 4.5 minutes, and the worst of it was glass in a palm. That isn't luck exactly. You'll understand it better tomorrow. This building didn't drop. It's 4 blocks west of where the block went down. And 4 blocks was the difference. And nobody in here will ever know why the line ran where it ran. Outside, 4th Avenue is filling up with people. And every one of them is doing the same thing. Walking slow, looking down, not at the damage, at the ground, right in front of their own shoes. The next 3 or 4 feet of it. That's the walk of the whole city tonight, and it starts within 5 minutes of the shaking stopping. Everybody in downtown Anchorage moving at the pace of somebody crossing a frozen pond, heads down, watching where their feet go. Nobody is running. You need to know that, because everything you've ever seen about a disaster has people running in it. Nobody runs. There's nowhere to run to, and the running surface is what betrayed you. And the whole town has quietly agreed on this without anybody saying it. A man in a suit walks past you with his shoes in his hand, socks on, a foot of slush on the sidewalk, carrying his shoes. And he doesn't look like he knows he's doing it. People are asking each other things. Was that the whole town? Is it just downtown? Did anybody hear about the hillside? Nobody knows. That's the answer to all of it. There isn't one person on 4th Avenue at 5:45 who knows anything. And information starts moving anyway. Because it has to. You hear the Presbyterian church tower is down. You hear the big department store came apart. You hear a number of people dead downtown. And it's a big number. And it isn't true. And the man saying it heard it from somebody who heard it. That's how the whole night is going to go, and you can already feel the shape of it. Now the thing that isn't happening, and it's the biggest thing in Anchorage tonight. There's no fire. Go find a photograph of San Francisco after 1906. That city didn't die from the shaking. It burned for 3 days. Anchorage doesn't burn. Part of that is the season. Everything in this town is under snow, and everything is wet, and it's 20-something degrees out. The rest of it is the power. And it's a piece of luck so thin it's hard to look at. The electricity went out during the shaking, somewhere in the first minute. While the ground was still going, the whole grid dropped, and every wire that came down into the street after that came down dead. There are broken gas lines in this city tonight. There are downed power lines across wet pavement in a dozen places. In any other order, at any other hour. That's a fire. And a fire in a downtown built mostly of frame buildings, with the water mains broken and no pressure in the hydrants. It doesn't happen. Nobody planned it. Nobody gets credit for it. It just went out at the right second. The other thing is the day. You'll understand this over the next 24 hours, in pieces. And each piece is going to hit harder than the last. It's Good Friday. School was out. Every school in Anchorage was empty at 5:36 in the afternoon. The stores were closing early, and most had already closed. The offices let out at noon or 1. 4th Avenue, at 5:36, on a normal Friday in March, has 3 or 4 times the people on it that it had today. That block that went down took the sidewalk in front of it. Now the walk. You stand outside the store and look west and do the arithmetic. 4 miles to Turnagain Heights. There's no bus. There isn't going to be a bus tonight or tomorrow. You could try to find a ride. And you think about it. And There are a few cars moving on 4th already, going slow and going around things. But you don't know these people, and you don't know how far any of them are going. And you've already seen what the street looks like, a block and a half east of here. Your manager asks where you live. You tell him. He goes quiet for a second and a half, maybe. And then he says, the road out that way is going to be bad, and you ought to wait. That's all he says. He doesn't say why he went quiet. Later, much later, you'll wonder how much he already suspected. Standing on 4th Avenue at 5:45, with a bluff over the water 4 miles west, and a whole city's worth of ground behaving the way it just behaved. You say you're going. He doesn't argue. He says be careful where you put your feet, which turns out to be the most useful thing anybody says to you all night. Then he asks if you've got gloves. You don't. He goes back into the dark store and comes out with a pair of men's work gloves off a rack. Brown cotton. Too big? He puts them in your hands and says, don't worry about it. He's standing in a store with the front window out and the stock on the floor and the display case face down. And he gives you $1 worth of gloves and tells you not to worry about it. You put them on. Your fingers still won't go flat, so you work them in one at a time. Then you look down at your feet. Flats, thin soles, low sides, a strap across the top, wet through already from crawling on the sidewalk. There are boots at your house, rubber, lined, over the ankle, by the back door where you left them this morning because it was bright out, and because they're ugly. Your mother said 4 words about it on your way out, and you said the thing you say back. You start walking west on 4th Avenue at about 10 minutes to 6 in the evening. You know how to get home. That isn't a thing you've ever had to think about. You've gone this way twice a week for a year, and you could do it in the dark. And the route is a simple thing that lives somewhere below thinking, the way the route to your own kitchen does. Out 4th, over to the west side of downtown, out along the road that runs toward the bluff. Then the last stretch through the neighborhood. 4 miles, an hour and 10 minutes on foot in good conditions. You walked it once in October when you missed the bus, and you were mad about it the whole way. It takes you a little over 3 hours tonight. You lose the first route inside of 4 blocks. There's a crack across the road you can't step over. It isn't a hole, and it isn't dramatic. A split in the pavement running diagonally from one side to the other. 18 inches at the widest, with the 2 edges at different heights. 18 inches is nothing. You could jump it. You stand there a while and you don't, because you're looking down into it, and it's dark in there, and it goes deeper than a street should go. And because you watched one of these open and close on 4th Avenue with a sound like a door slamming, and now you can't look at a crack in the ground without seeing it as something with a hinge. You go around, a block north and a block back, and it puts you on a street you don't normally use. That's the whole night in miniature, right there in the first 10 minutes. You aren't going to walk home. You're going to be routed home by a city deciding where you can and can't go. Here's what stops you over and over in the next 3 hours. Cracks everywhere, in every side. Most you can cross, some you can't. And the ones that stop you aren't always the big ones. Because a big, open crack you can see the bottom of is honest. And a 4-inch one running the length of a street with fresh dirt kicked up on both sides is telling you something about what's underneath. Drops. Places where the pavement on one side sits a foot or two lower, and the whole sheet of it has tilted. You cross a lot of those. You go slow and put a hand down. Water. Mains are broken all over this city, and it's coming up out of the ground and running down the streets. And it's 26 degrees. It runs. It spreads. And it starts to skin over. By 8 o'clock tonight, there are streets in Anchorage with an inch of new ice on them. Wires. Down in loops, in 5 or 6 places. Everybody treats them as live. You go around every one by 20 feet, and so does everybody else. Buildings. There are places you won't walk under. And you make that decision about 10 times an hour. And you get better at it as you go. Now here's the thing you learn tonight that nobody teaches anybody. You learn to read the ground. By an hour in, you're doing it without noticing. Snow broken up into plates with dirt showing between them means the ground moved there and moved a lot. A fence line that isn't straight anymore. A row of parked cars with one sitting nose down. A sidewalk with a step in it. But the one you learn first and use the most is trees. A tree tells you the truth about the ground it's in. Trees grow straight up, and they've been doing it for 50 years, and they don't lean on their own. So when you come around a corner and there's a stand of birch in somebody's yard, and 3 of them are standing at 15 degrees off vertical, all leaning the same way, you don't go into that yard. And you don't go into the street in front of it either. You go a block around. You aren't thinking about liquefaction. You've never heard the word, and you won't for years. What you've got is a rule, learned in 90 minutes on foot. And the rule is that leaning trees mean the ground under them went somewhere. That rule is going to matter a great deal in about 2 hours. Now the people, you're not alone out here, not remotely. There are people walking in every direction on every street tonight. And after the first mile, you stop being surprised by them. Almost all of them are going towards something. Toward a house, toward a school, toward a place where somebody is. You start passing people headed the other way, and you start doing what everybody's doing, which is trading. You stop, both of you, in the middle of a street with your hands in your pockets. And you tell each other what's behind you. You tell a man that 4th is down on the north side east of C Street, and he has to go around south. He tells you there's a place on 9th where the road has dropped 3 feet clean across, and you can't get a car through. Nobody introduces themselves. Nobody asks a name all night. Somewhere around the 2nd mile, you meet the man with the ladder. He's coming east, and he's carrying a wooden extension ladder on his shoulder. Alone, which is not a thing one man does with a ladder that size. He's got it balanced at about the 4th rung, and he's walking with it, and it's swinging. You get out of his way, and then you ask him where he's taking it. He says the bowl. You don't know what that means. He says it again like it's obvious. And then he sees your face, and he tells you. His mother-in-law is in a house off Spinard, where the ground dropped and the front steps are hanging off the porch about 5 feet in the air. And she's 79, and she won't come out a window. He isn't upset when he says it. He's a little out of breath, and mostly he sounds annoyed with her. He asks how far you're going, and you tell him Turnagain, and he says, huh? Then he says something you'll think about later. He says the ladder was in a neighbor's garage, and the garage is on its side, and he took it. And he doesn't know whose neighbor, and doesn't know their name. And he says he'll bring it back. He shifts it on his shoulder and goes on east. You watch him for a second, and then you go. And here's what starts happening about 1.5 miles in. And it's the worst part of the walk. You start asking about Turnagain. You ask a woman with 2 kids, and she says she doesn't know. She's coming from the other direction. You ask 2 men, and one of them says he heard it's bad out there. You ask what bad means. He says he doesn't know. Heard it from a guy at a gas station. Then, about 20 minutes later, you ask a man walking east. And he stops. And he looks at you a second longer than he should. He says he heard the bluff went. You ask him what that means? The bluff went. He says he doesn't know. He says that's what a fellow told him. And you stand there in the road in the last of the light, and you can't make that sentence into a picture. The bluff went. The bluff has been there since before Anchorage, and it's a couple 100 feet of ground with houses on top of it. And there's no version of the bluff went that your mind will take. So you do what you did in the store. You put it down, and you walk faster. Your feet stopped being warm somewhere around the 2nd mile. It happened in stages you can name. First, they were cold and wet, which is a thing you can walk in. Then the cold went in and up and got past your ankles. Now they're just weight on the end of your legs. And you can feel the ground through the soles, but you can't feel the soles. You fall twice in the next mile, both times on ice that came up out of a broken main and froze on a street. The second one puts you down hard on your hip, and you sit there in the road with the wind out of you. Getting up, you notice your hands have started to hurt again, which they hadn't been doing, and you understand that they'd gone numb, and now they're coming back, and that the gloves are the only reason your hands work at all. The light is going. It's after 7, and the sun is off the mountains, and the color is coming out of everything. And it'll be full dark before 9. There's no street light anywhere in Anchorage. Not one. Every pole in this city is dark, and every window in every house you pass is dark. And the only light out here is the sky. You're about 1 mile from the neighborhood, and up ahead, from somewhere out west, along the line where the houses ought to be, you can hear something. Voices. A lot of them, not close together, spread out over a wide area, and calling. Before you get there, 3 things happen on the way, and you'll carry all 3 of them longer than you'll carry the walk. The first is a store. You come out onto a wider street about 2 miles in, and there's a crowd standing in the road. Maybe 30 people, all facing the same direction, and none of them talking much. You look where they're looking. It's a department store, 4 stories. The biggest retail building in Anchorage. About a year old. Everybody in this town went and looked at it when it opened. The outside was faced in concrete. Big panels. The kind that get poured somewhere else, and brought in on a truck and hung on the frame. Several tons each. They came off. Not all of them. And that's what makes it look the way it looks. Most of the front is still there, with gaps in it where panels used to be. And each gap shows the bare structure underneath. The panels are in the street, lying across the sidewalk and out into the road. Flat and gray. Some broken and some whole. And the whole ones are worse. And there are cars underneath them. 3 that you can see from where you're standing. One of them has a panel across the roof, and the roof is at the level of the door handles. Nobody in the crowd is going near it. 2 men are standing close, and they aren't doing anything. And everybody else is back in the street where you are. You ask a woman next to you if anybody was in there. She says the store was closing. You ask if anybody was in the cars. She says she doesn't know. She says it quietly. Somebody will find out. Tonight or tomorrow. It won't be you. You stand in a road in the dusk and look at concrete lying on a car, and then you go around it. Because there's a bluff 4 miles west, and your mother is on the other side of it. The second is an apartment building. You come up on it half a mile later and stop dead in the street. It's 6 stories tall, and it isn't 6 stories tall anymore. Brand new. Concrete. Modern. The tallest apartment building in Anchorage. And it went up over the last year, and everybody watched it go up because there was nothing else like it in town. It's on the ground. The whole building came down onto itself. 6 floors are a pile maybe 2 stories high. Slabs on slabs at angles. Rebar out the sides of everything. And standing straight up out of the middle of it, unbroken, at the full original height, is the elevator shaft. That's all that's left standing, a hollow concrete tower with nothing around it. It looks like a chimney on a burned farm. You stand in the road with your hands in your coat, and you can't stop looking at it. And there are a dozen other people doing the same thing. And here's what somebody finally says out loud. Nobody had moved in yet. 6 stories of apartments. Finished. Ready. And it wasn't open. There was not one person inside it. At 5:36 in the afternoon, you hear a man say it. And then somebody repeats it. And there's a sound in the small crowd that isn't relief and isn't anything else you can name. The third is a school. The road takes you up along a rise, and there's a low building set back from it. And you know it. Everybody in Anchorage knows it. It's an elementary school. The middle of it is gone. Not knocked down, split. The ground under that school came apart and took the building with it. And a section through the middle has dropped and twisted. And the 2 ends are still up and still recognizable, and they aren't parts of the same building anymore. You can see into classrooms. The wall is off one of them, and it's an ordinary elementary school classroom in there. And there's still a chart on the back wall, and the desks are piled over each other in a corner where the floor tilts. There's a coat rack visible with things hanging on it. You stand at the edge of the road in the near dark and look into a room where 30 children sit on a Thursday. There's nobody in it. There's nobody in any of it. It's Good Friday. School's been out since Thursday afternoon, and it isn't back until Monday. That building held several hundred children yesterday, and it'll hold them again in a week. And at 5:36 this afternoon, it held nobody at all. 3 buildings in 2.5 miles. A store with the front off it, closing early for the holiday. An apartment tower flat on the ground with nobody living in it yet. A school torn in half with every child in the city somewhere else. Nobody arranged that. There's no reason in it. It happened to be Friday, and it happened to be a holiday, and it happened to be 6 minutes after most of this town went home. You don't think any of that on the walk. You don't have the pieces yet, and you wouldn't have room for it if you did. What you do is stand in front of a broken school for about 15 seconds in the dark. and then turn west, and keep going. Now the last mile, and the last mile is where you do the thing you shouldn't. The road you want runs straight out toward the neighborhood. And about 3/4 of a mile short of it, there's a place where it crosses low ground. You come up on it, and you can see in the last light that the road there is wrong. It hasn't dropped. It's worse than that. In a way you understand immediately, because you've been learning this for 2 hours. The pavement across that stretch has come up in long ridges with cracks between them, and the snow on either side is broken into plates with dirt showing through. And there's a line of spruce on the north side, and 4 of them are leaning the same direction, toward the low ground. That's the rule. You learned it an hour and a half ago, and you've used it maybe 6 times tonight, and it has never once been wrong. The rule says, go around. Around is south, down to the next road that crosses, and back up. You know that road. You can see where it goes from here. It's about 40 minutes. You stand at the edge of the bad ground and you do the arithmetic, and it is the coldest arithmetic you've ever done in your life. 40 minutes. It's a little after 8. Your mother has been out there for 2.5 hours and you don't know one single thing about her. And there are voices coming off the west end of this valley, and you can hear them from here. 40 minutes. You go across. And here's the part you'll never tell anybody, including yourself. For about 10 years, you don't go across carefully. You go across fast. Some part of you has decided that speed is safety, which is not a thing anybody believes about ground that might open. And you go over those ridges at a half run in flats with no feeling in your feet. You go down once, hard, on your hands, on pavement that's tilted about 15 degrees. Your right palm opens where the glass went in this afternoon, and you feel that one all the way up your arm. Nothing happens. The ground holds. It doesn't move, and it doesn't open. And about 90 seconds later, you're up the far bank and standing on flat pavement on the other side with your heart going in your throat and your hand bleeding into a work glove. You didn't beat anything. The ground was never going to do it in those 90 seconds, and it wouldn't have done it in the 40 minutes either. But you didn't know that. And you win. And you'll be 40 years old before you can look straight at the fact that you gambled with a piece of ground because you were in a hurry to find your mother. You stand there for a second and get your breath. Then you go on west, and the voices get louder. And about 10 minutes later, the road runs out. The road runs out. That's the first thing, and it's very simple, and you don't understand it at all. You come up the last long stretch heading west, and there's a road under your feet. The road you've walked and ridden and driven 1,000 times, and then it isn't there. Not blocked, not cracked. Gone. The pavement runs out ahead of you into raw dirt and broken snow, and then it drops away. And past it, in the last of the light, there's a shape to the land that is not the shape of your neighborhood. You stand at the end of the road. There are other people here, 15 or 20, spread out along where it ends. Some of them standing exactly like you are, and some of them already out in it with flashlights. Nobody's stopping anybody. There's no police out here, and no barricade, and no authority of any kind. There's the end of a road and people standing at it. The light is nearly gone. There's still that late blue that hangs around up here after sunset. Not enough to read by. Enough to see shapes. So what you get is the outline. And the outline is wrong in a way that takes you a full minute to start taking in. There are trees out there. That's the first thing that hits you. And it's such a small, stupid thing to be first. The trees are at angles, not fallen, standing, rooted, upright in their own dirt, tilted 20 and 30 degrees in different directions, like something knocked them and they stayed. Behind them, the ground is in blocks. That's the only word for it. The land has come apart into pieces, and the pieces have gone in different directions. And some are lower than they were, and some are higher, and some have tipped up on an edge. Between them are open cracks you could put a car in. The whole thing steps down toward the water. Your neighborhood is out there. It's in front of you right now, and you can't find it. There's no street. That's what your mind keeps returning to and refusing. There's no street going out from where you're standing. There's no line of anything. The geometry of the place, the grid, the thing that made it a neighborhood instead of a piece of land, has been taken out of it. You're looking straight at your own street from 400 feet away, and you can't tell where it is. You start walking out into it. You do it because other people are doing it. That's the only reason, and it's enough. And here's what walking out onto that ground is like. It isn't a slope. You keep expecting a slope. It's more like walking across broken ice on a river. Except the ice is dirt and grass and snow and driveway. And the pieces are the size of houses. You go down a step of 4 feet. You walk 50 feet on level ground that seems completely normal. Snow on it. A bush growing in it. And then it ends, and there's a gap, and you have to find a way around. You come up onto something, and you're standing on a piece of pavement about the size of a room, at an angle, with a painted line on it. That's a piece of a street. You're standing on it. It's nowhere near where a street should be. Somebody's fence is out here. A whole section of it. Upright. With nothing on either side. There are houses. You start seeing them once you're a couple 100 feet in. They aren't flat. That's what you were braced for, and it isn't what happened. Some of these houses are basically intact, and that's worse. There's one sitting at maybe 30 degrees with its roofline unbroken. There's another that slid down and came to rest against a rise of dirt with the front buried to the windows and the back up in the air. There's one, and you look at it a long time. That's right side up and level and completely undamaged, standing in a place where there was never a house. It moved. The ground it's on picked it up and carried it and set it down somewhere else. And the ground put it down gently. Personal things are on the snow. You'll see more tomorrow in daylight, and it'll be worse then. Tonight, you get it in pieces. In the last blue light, and in the swing of somebody's flashlight, a kitchen chair on its side in the dirt. Papers, a lot of papers, blown out across the snow in a fan. A curtain, still on its rod, lying flat. And now, the sound. This is what you heard from a mile off. People calling names. They're spread out over a huge area, out in the blocks and down toward the water. And you can hear them, but you can only see the ones with lights. A voice, then nothing. Then another voice, 200 feet away. Then nothing. Some of them get answered. That's the sound you'll hear for the rest of your life. Not the calling. The answering, a man's voice going up somewhere out in the dark, and a woman somewhere else yelling back, and the two of them going back and forth, closer and closer, until they stop. There's a man near you with a flashlight, walking, not calling anything, just walking and shining it into the gaps. You start calling your mother. You do it standing on a block of ground with a piece of a street on it, into a dark that has your neighborhood in it somewhere. And you call the word mother over and over in a voice you don't recognize. Nothing comes back for a long time. You go farther out. You get turned around twice. At one point you climb up onto a ridge of dirt with a birch lying across it. And from the top you can see the water of the inlet in the last light. And you're much closer to it than you should be. Then somebody says your name. Not your mother. A woman's voice off to the right. Somebody who knows you. It's your neighbor from 3 doors down. She's got a flashlight, and she's wearing a man's coat over her nightclothes with the sleeves turned back twice at the wrist. And she says your name again. Then she says your mother's over there. She points with the flashlight. There's a group 200 feet away, up on a piece of high ground, maybe 15 of them standing together. And you go across that dirt faster than is safe. And your mother is in the middle of it holding your sister. She's got her on one hip. Your sister is 4, and she's asleep. Actually asleep, with her face in your mother's collar. And your brother is standing against your mother's leg with both arms around it. Your mother sees you coming and doesn't say anything at all. She reaches out and gets a handful of the front of your coat and pulls you in. And she's got a 4-year-old on one arm and a 9-year-old on her leg, and you're 16 and taller than she is. And she holds onto the front of your coat and doesn't let go of it for a long time. Nobody says anything for a while. When she does talk, the first thing she says is that the boots are still by the back door. She says it, looking down at your feet. Then she says the house is on the other side. And she turns and points out into the dark where all of it is. And you look where she's pointing, and there's nothing out there you can identify. You ask where Dad is. She says he's not home yet. That's all. He's not home yet. He works down by Ship Creek, and that's 5 miles the other way, and there's no phone, and no power, and no way to know anything. It's 25 degrees, and dropping. It's dark. There's a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old, and a woman in a housecoat with a man's coat over it. And none of you have a house. Somebody behind you starts calling a name again. Nobody answers that one. Full dark arrives, and it arrives all the way. You've never seen this town dark. Nobody has. Anchorage, on an ordinary March night, is a bowl of lights you can see from 20 miles out on the highway. Street lights along every road, house windows, the sign on top of a hotel, headlights moving on the arterials, the airport out west, lit up like something coming in to land. All of it is off. There isn't a bulb burning in 45,000 people's worth of city, and it's clear tonight, which is why it's going to get so cold, and which is also why there's more sky over you right now than you've ever seen from inside a town. The stars come all the way down to the mountains on both sides. You stand on a piece of broken ground in Turnagain Heights with your sister's weight against your shoulder and look up at that. And it's the first time all evening that anything has been beautiful. and you feel bad about noticing. Here's the shift, and it's the whole rest of the night. All day, the danger was something you could see. Now, you can't see anything. So the night is made out of sound, and every sound is a question. There's a rule you figure out inside the first hour. You can't tell what anything is. A noise happens somewhere out in the slide. A heavy, dull one. A settling. And it might be a piece of ground going, or a house coming apart, or nothing at all. You look toward it. Everybody looks toward it. Nobody can see a thing. Nobody says anything. And after a few seconds, everybody looks away. That happens maybe 20 times tonight. Flashlights are the whole economy out here. There are 6 of them among all the people on this piece of high ground, and everybody knows exactly where each one is. They get passed around. Somebody needs one for 2 minutes. Gets it. Brings it back. And nobody has to be told to bring it back. They're all going yellow already. Nobody has spare batteries. Because who has spare batteries? Your neighbor in the man's coat has one, and she's careful with it. She's the one doing most of the going back and forth. And by 10 o'clock, she's turning it off between uses and walking in the dark. You watch her come up out of the slide once with it off, and only find the group by voice. Now, the cold. And this is where the night stops being about the earthquake. It's in the low 20s, and it's headed for somewhere around 10 degrees before morning. That's ordinary for late March in Anchorage. Completely unremarkable weather. It's also the thing that could kill people out here tonight, and everybody knows it. Your mother is in a housecoat with a wool coat over it. Your sister is in a nightgown and somebody's blanket. Your brother has boots and a coat because he's 9 and he was outside when it started. You're in a car coat and flats soaked through. Your feet went past cold 3 hours ago. Now they're the weight on the end of your legs and nothing else. You take a glove off and put your hand on your own ankle at one point, just to check. And the skin is cold in a way skin shouldn't be. And you put the glove back on, and don't do that again. So the night becomes a set of problems, and every one of them is small and practical, and there's nothing dramatic about any of them. The first is where to be. The houses standing out there aren't usable. Not because they'll fall on you, because they're sitting on ground that came apart 4 hours ago, and nobody out here trusts 1 inch of it. There's a woman who wants to go back to hers for blankets. 2 men talk her out of it, and then one of them goes with her anyway. And they're gone 20 minutes, and it's the longest 20 minutes on this hill. They come back with blankets. The second is cars. That's the answer. Mostly, cars are the shelter tonight in Anchorage, and it isn't only here. It's the whole city. There are people all over this town sitting in a parked automobile with their family in it. Because a car doesn't fall on you, and a car has a heater, except the gas. Every man out here has done the same math, and the math is a quarter tank or a half tank, and no station in Anchorage has power to run a pump. So you run the engine 10 minutes and shut it off. You get the inside warm and then sit in it going cold. And after half an hour, you run it again. Somebody's father does the arithmetic out loud and says he can go all night doing that if he's careful. The third is fire. And here's where you find out how thoroughly the ground got into everybody. Somebody suggests building one. There's wood everywhere out here. More broken lumber lying on this ground than anybody could burn in a week. And it's cold. And a fire is the obvious thing. A man says no. He says there's gas out there. That's the whole objection, and it ends the conversation immediately. There are gas lines underground that came apart, and nobody knows what's leaking, and nobody can smell anything in this cold. And one match on this bluff tonight is a thing nobody is going to be responsible for. So there's no fire on this hill. 40 people sitting in the dark at 10 degrees, next to enough loose lumber to heat a house. And nobody strikes a match. And nobody has to be told twice. The fourth is water. Nobody's thirsty yet. It's a few hours in, but somebody brings it up, and the answer is, there's no water in the pipes anywhere in this part of town, and probably not in a lot of the city. There's snow? That's a bad answer. Snow is 1/10 of the volume, and it costs you body heat to melt it in your mouth. Somebody has a thermos of coffee out of a lunchbox, and it goes around, and there are 12 people, and it's a pint. You get about 2 swallows, and it's the first warm thing since the store, and you can feel it the whole way down. The 5th is the little ones. Your sister's been asleep since before you got here, and she's going to wake up. She does it at maybe 10:30, all the way, and immediately, and she doesn't cry. She asks where the house is. Your mother says it's over there, and we'll go back in the morning. Your sister says why? Your mother says because it's dark. That's the whole lie. And it's a good one because it's true. She's back asleep against your shoulder 20 minutes later. Your brother hasn't said one word in an hour and a half. He's 9. He's standing there in his coat and boots, holding a flashlight that's been off since somebody handed it to him. And he hasn't asked for anything, and he hasn't complained about the cold. You put your hand on the back of his neck at some point, and he leans into your side and stays there. That's all he does all night. Around 11, the one good thing happens, and it's very small. A man on the far side of the group has been trying to get a transistor radio to do anything for about 10 minutes, and it's giving him nothing but hiss. And he finally says out loud that the batteries are dead. And your neighbor in the man's coat says, from about 10 feet away, that there's a whole rack of them at the hardware on Northern Lights. She doesn't say it as a joke. She says it flat, like a woman giving directions. There's about a second and a half where nobody does anything. Then a man laughs. Once. Short. Then the man with the radio laughs. And then somebody else. And it goes maybe 4 seconds, and it dies out, and nobody says anything after it. 4 seconds. That's the only laugh on that hill all night. And every person standing there needed it. And you will remember that woman's voice saying the word hardware for the rest of your life. Now, your father, it's been 5 hours. Your mother doesn't mention him, and doesn't ask anybody about him, and doesn't look toward the road. She does one thing. Every 20 minutes or so, she changes which arm your sister is on. And when she does it, she turns a little, and the turn takes her a few degrees east. That's the entire visible content of 5 hours of not knowing. You don't say anything about it either. Around 11:30, 3 men come up out of the slide with flashlights, and one of them says they got the last people out of one of the houses down there. Somebody asks, how many? He says 4, and everybody's all right. There's a small sound from the people on the hill when he says that. And it's the only good news anybody has heard since 5:30 in the afternoon. Then somebody asks him what it's like down there. He doesn't answer. He stands there a second. Then says he's going back down, and he takes the flashlight and goes. It comes at about 11:20. You're sitting on the running board of somebody's station wagon, with your sister across your lap and your brother beside you, half asleep in the way where you aren't resting at all. The ground moves. And here's what happens in your body. And it happens before anything reaches your mind. You're standing up. You don't remember deciding to, and you don't remember doing it. You have a 4-year-old in your arms, and you've gotten off a running board holding her, and you're on your feet with your knees bent and your weight down. And the whole thing took about half a second. Everybody on that hill is up. 40 people, all of them, all at once, out of cars and off the ground. And there's a sound that goes through the group that isn't words. The shake itself is nothing. 4 seconds. A small one. On a normal Tuesday in Anchorage in 1963, this knocks a cup off a shelf and gets mentioned at supper. It ends and everybody stays standing. Nobody sits down for a long time. Because here's the whole difference between tonight and every earthquake anybody has ever felt before tonight. They all start small. That's what you learned at 5:36 this afternoon. The big one started exactly like this. It started as a thing you could ignore, and it built, and it kept building, and it went for 4.5 minutes and took a city block 10 feet down. So, a 4-second shake at 11:20 at night isn't a 4-second shake anymore. It's the first 4 seconds of something, and you have to stand there and find out which something. That's the part nobody who wasn't here understands. It isn't the shaking, it's that every one of them is an unfinished sentence. Somebody's father says that one wasn't much. Nobody answers him. Now here's what starts tonight and doesn't stop. They keep coming. Another one 20 minutes later. Another after that. By 2 in the morning you've felt 6 or 7 you're sure of. And probably that many again you weren't sure about. Because that's the other thing that starts tonight. You stop being able to tell. Somebody walks past the car and the car moves on its springs and you're up. A truck goes by out on the road somewhere and the vibration comes through the ground and you're up. Your brother shifts his weight against your side, and for a quarter of a second, your whole body says earthquake before it says brother. Everybody out here is doing it. You can watch it happen across the group. Somebody bumps a car door and 4 heads come up at once. Nobody says anything about it because everybody's doing it, and there's nothing to say. By midnight, you've all developed the thing. There's a lamp hanging in one of the standing houses out on the slide, visible through a window, some kind of fixture on a chain. Somebody noticed it an hour ago, and now it's what everybody uses. You look at the lamp. Anything happens. Any noise. Any movement. Any feeling in your feet you're not sure about. And every head on that hill turns to the window with the lamp in it. If it's still, it was nothing. That lamp is the only instrument in Anchorage tonight, and it belongs to a family nobody can find. Around 1 in the morning, a shake comes that's bigger, 6 or 8 seconds. Enough to move the cars. And there's a piece of it in the middle where it feels like it's getting stronger. 2 seconds of that. Just 2. And a woman says, "Oh no," out loud. And it's the first time all night that anybody on this hill has let the fear out through their mouth. It stops. Nobody says anything to her. Somebody puts a hand on her back. But everybody out here now knows what everybody else has been thinking since 5:30 in the afternoon. If the ground can do that once, there's no rule anywhere that says it can't do it again tonight. You're on a piece of high ground next to a slide that took your neighborhood 4 hours ago. In the dark, at 10 degrees, with a 4-year-old asleep on you. And the thing that took it is still down there working, somewhere around 1:30, out on the road. Headlights come up the hill. Everybody turns. It's a truck, moving slow, and it stops where the road ends. And two men get out and come toward the group with flashlights. And one of them starts saying something about a school gymnasium and buses in the morning. And a man gets out of the passenger side and stands by the truck. He doesn't come with them. He stands there in the light of his own headlights, looking up at the group of people on the high ground. And he's got a work coat on, and he's holding his hat in his hand. Your mother is standing up. You didn't see her stand up. Nobody moves for a second. He's a shape in front of headlights, and there are 4 or 5 men on that hill tonight in work coats. And from 200 feet in the dark, a shape is a shape. Then he takes about 3 steps toward the slope and stops, and looks up at all of you. And he still doesn't say anything. That's the part. He's looking for his own family in a crowd of 40 people on a piece of ground he's never stood on before. In the dark. And he doesn't know which of these shapes is his either. Your mother says his name. Not loud. She says it the way you'd say it across a kitchen. He hears it. She goes 6 steps down the slope and he comes up, and they meet somewhere in the middle, and neither of them says another word. He puts his arms around her, and his hat is still in his hand, and it ends up against her back. They stand there maybe 5 seconds. Then he lets go and says something to her. Low. And she says something back. And he comes up the rest of the way to where you are and takes your sister off you in one move without asking, and puts his other hand on the back of your brother's head. That's the reunion. That's all of it. He's been walking for 4 hours. He got out of the yard down by Ship Creek at about 6, tried to drive, made about a mile, left the car somewhere and walked the rest, and came the long way around because the direct way had a road out. He doesn't tell any of that tonight. He tells it in about 9 sentences over the next 3 days, in pieces. When somebody asks him something, what he says tonight is that the bridge over the creek is bad and there's a fire station handing out coffee on the way in. He doesn't say one word about what he saw between Ship Creek and here. You'll think about that for years. He walked across the whole width of a wrecked city in the dark and got here at 1:30 in the morning, and the first thing out of his mouth was about coffee. He looks out at the slide for a while. He stands at the edge of the high ground with your sister on his shoulder and looks out at where the neighborhood was. And there's nothing to see but shapes. And he looks at it for about a minute. Then he says, "All right." That's it. All right? And he turns around and starts asking practical questions. Now, the actual problem, which is where everybody sleeps. The 2 men from the truck are still saying their piece about a school gymnasium and buses in the morning. The school is a couple miles east. They can take some people now. About half the group goes. Your family doesn't. And the reason isn't a good one, and your father knows it isn't. Your mother says she's not going that far from the house. The house is out there in the dark, tilted, sitting on ground that came apart. with everything your family owns in it. And she can't walk 2 miles away from it tonight. She doesn't argue for it. She says it once, and your father looks at her and then tells the men no thanks. So there are 4 options, and you're going to hear about all of them. The first is the house. Somebody raises it, not your parents. A neighbor points out that the house is standing, that it's got beds in it, and blankets, and a stove. Your father says no before the sentence is finished. He doesn't explain, and nobody makes him. Everybody standing here watched what the ground did, and everybody understands that a standing house on that ground is not a house. It's a thing that happens to be up right now. The second is somebody else's house. There are houses back east of here, off the slide, on ground that didn't move. The trouble is, nobody knows which ground didn't move. That's the whole problem with tonight. The land in Turnagain looked exactly like the land 2 miles east until 5:45 this evening. And there's a second thing, and it's the reason people all over Anchorage are outside tonight instead of indoors. Nobody wants a roof over them. It's 10 degrees, and every person in this city would rather be cold than be under something. The third is straight outside, on the ground, with blankets. That gets talked about seriously because there are more people than car space. And some people out here are going to do it. At 10 degrees. With wind off the inlet. With wet feet. That's a real risk. And every adult here knows it. The ones who do it tonight are the ones who have to. The fourth is the car. That's what you get. It isn't your car. Your father's car is a mile back on a road somewhere. It's a neighbor's station wagon. And there are 7 people in it. And 4 of them are yours. Your father's in the driver's seat because he's the one who'll be running the engine. Your mother's in the passenger seat with your sister across her. Your neighbor in the man's coat is in the middle seat with her boy and with you. Your brother's in the way back on his side on the folded down floor with a blanket. And he fits. And you don't. The windows go opaque in about 15 minutes. 7 people breathing in a closed car at 10 degrees. And it frosts on the inside. And you scrape a place with your thumbnail every so often. And there's nothing out there to look at anyway. Nobody takes their coat off. Nobody takes their shoes off either. And that's a decision. And it's the same decision every person in this town makes tonight. You keep your shoes on so you can get out. Your flats are soaked and your feet have been wet for 6 hours. And the smart thing, the thing anybody would tell you, is get them off and get those feet dry. You don't. And neither does anybody else in that car. Because if the ground goes again, you're going out that door in 1 second, and there's no version of that where you're looking for a shoe. What you do instead is get your feet up off the floor and sit on them, which helps a little, and which you're going to regret at about 4 in the morning when you try to straighten your legs. Your father runs the engine in stretches, 10 minutes on, 30 off. He does it on his own watch, which still works. The 10 minutes are wonderful. The heater comes up and the frost goes off the windshield and the inside of that car gets warm enough that you start to slide down. The 30 are long. By the 3rd cycle, you know the exact point in the cold where you start to shiver, which is about 18 minutes in. And your feet come back during the 2nd warm stretch, which is worse than having them numb. They come back as pins, and then as a hard, steady ache in the arches and along the outside edges. And there's nothing to do about it. and you sit there in the dark, waiting for it to be over. Your neighbor notices you shifting. She doesn't say anything. She takes the corner of the blanket that's over her boy and puts it across your knees. And you say thank you. And she says nothing at all. The door doesn't get locked. Nobody locks a door in Anchorage tonight. And now, the part that's the reason this chapter exists, you do not sleep. You're more tired than you've ever been in your life. You've been awake since 7 this morning. You worked a shift. You were in a building for 4.5 minutes. You walked 4 miles in flats over broken ground, and you ran across a piece of it you shouldn't have. Your body is finished. Your body wants this more than it has ever wanted anything. And you can't get more than about 11 minutes at a time. Here's what happens. Over and over. All night. You go down. It's fast when it comes. You're gone in under a minute, and it isn't sleep so much as being switched off. And then something moves. Somebody in the middle seat shifts their weight. That's all it takes. The car rocks maybe an inch on its springs. And you're awake? And you aren't just awake. You're already sitting up with your hand on the door handle. And your heart is going hard enough that you can feel it in your neck. And all of that happened while you were asleep. Your body did it without you. Then you sit there 4 or 5 seconds and work out that it was the neighbor's boy rolling over. Then you lie back down. Then you do it again 20 minutes later. Every single thing does it. Your father starts the engine, and the whole car shudders as it turns over. And you're up. Somebody outside walks past on the frozen ground, and the crunch comes through. And you're up. The metal in the car makes a noise as it cools after the heater goes off. A tick. A small pop somewhere in the doorframe. And you're up. And here's the worst one. And everybody in that car has it, and nobody mentions it for years. Sometimes nothing happens at all. You come up out of sleep hard. Sitting, hand on the door, heart going, and there was no sound and no movement, and nothing touched that car. Your body ran the drill on its own. Around 3 in the morning, there's a real one. A proper aftershock. 5 or 6 seconds. Enough to rock the station wagon on its springs, and enough that your father's hand goes to the key without turning it. Everybody's awake for that one instantly, and nobody says anything and nobody gets out. You lie there, afterward, listening to 7 people breathe. Your mother says something to your father in the front seat. Very quietly. 3 or 4 words. He says something shorter back. That's the only conversation between them all night. And at maybe 4:30 in the morning, when the sky east of town is not light, but is no longer completely black, you get about 40 minutes. It's the longest stretch of the night, and you don't get it because you calm down. You get it because your body finally hits a wall it can't climb. And it takes the sleep the way a person underwater takes a breath. And it doesn't ask you about it. You wake up at 5-something with your face against a cold window and a 4-year-old's foot in your ribs, and no idea for 2 full seconds where you are. Then you remember all of it at once, in order, and it takes about 1.5 seconds. That's going to happen every morning for months. Somebody has a radio at 6 in the morning. It's a portable the size of a lunchbox. Brown leatherette with a handle. And it belongs to a man 2 cars over who had it in his trunk with a set of batteries because he uses it when he fishes. That's the whole information system on this hill. One man's fishing radio. By 6:10, there are 20 people standing around a station wagon tailgate in the half-dark listening to it. Nobody talking, and it's turned up as loud as it goes. Here's what you have to understand about last night. Anchorage did not know what happened to Anchorage. Nobody on this hill knows what 4th Avenue looks like. You do, because you were standing on it. And you're the only person in this group who has seen downtown since 5:36 yesterday afternoon. And nobody anywhere knows about anywhere else. The telephone lines out of Alaska went down with everything else. The regular commercial connections to the rest of the country were broken. For a good part of last night, the way word got out of this state was amateur radio operators. Men sitting in their houses with equipment they bought themselves, relaying names and messages south, one at a time. So what comes out of that lunchbox is a mess. And everybody standing there takes all of it as gospel because it's all there is. Some of it's right, some of it's badly wrong. There's no way to tell which is which. And the wrong ones often sound more reasonable. Here's what you hear, roughly in order. You hear about downtown, 4th Avenue, the department store, the apartment building. They have that, and it's right. And you stand there confirming it in your own head as it comes. You hear a number of dead in Anchorage. You'll hear 4 different numbers before noon. The first one is large. It's a lot larger than the truth. Somebody standing next to you makes a sound when it's read out. Then the other places, and this is where it goes somewhere else entirely. You hear the name Valdez. Valdez is a port town about 120 miles east of here on Prince William Sound, and it's small, a few hundred people, and there's a dock there, and a supply ship was tied up at it yesterday evening. The word that comes across the radio is water. That's the first time all night and all morning that anybody has said anything about water. And it doesn't fit anywhere in your head, because your entire experience of this thing is dirt. Something happened to the waterfront at Valdez. Something happened to the dock. The report is confused, and it changes twice while you're standing there. Then Seward. Seward is a railroad and port town south of here. The word out of Seward is fire, and oil tanks, and the waterfront, and something coming in off the bay. Then a name you've never heard in your life. It's a village, small, out on the Sound somewhere. And you don't know where, and neither does anybody around that radio. And the man reading the report doesn't seem to either. What he says about it is short. He says the village is gone, not damaged, gone. Nobody at that tailgate says a word about it. Somebody moves. That's all. You'll learn the details later, over weeks and years. And they're worse than anything the radio managed to say that morning. And then there's the one that's just wrong. And it's the one that does the most damage. Somebody comes on and says there's another one coming. A bigger one. Somebody predicted it. That goes through the group like cold water, and there's about a minute where nobody says anything at all. It isn't true. Nobody predicted anything. Nobody can. There's no such science, and there won't be. And that particular rumor is going to run through this city for days, and it's going to keep more people out of their houses than the aftershocks do. But standing at a tailgate at 6:30 in the morning on the 28th of March, you have no way on earth to know that. Your neighbor in the man's coat is standing on the other side of the tailgate with her arms folded. When the man with the radio starts to say something about it, she tells him to turn it down. He does. Nobody argues with her. And after a minute, the group starts breaking up. And that's the end of the radio for the morning. Now here's the thing that settles into the group over about 20 minutes. And you can feel it arrive. Anchorage starts to understand that it got off easy. That's a strange sentence about a city where a block of the main street dropped 10 feet and a neighborhood came apart. And it's true anyway, because what's coming across that radio is coastal Alaska, harbors and docks and small towns on the water, and the ocean doing something. And the numbers attached to those places are going to end up worse than the number attached to this one. A man finally says it out loud. He says it went easier on us than it did on them. Nobody agrees with him, and nobody argues. Your father isn't at the radio. He listened for about 10 minutes and then walked off to the edge of the high ground. And he's out there now in the gray light, with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the slide. You can see it now. That's the thing. The sky east of town has come up enough that there are shapes out there. Real ones. And the light is getting better every minute you stand here. Your mother comes and stands next to you and looks out where he's looking. Then she says, "We ought to go see it while it's light." The sun comes up over the mountains and the light comes across the whole valley at once. You've been out here all night. You've walked on this ground and called into it and slept 200 feet from it. You have not seen it. Now you do. The first thing daylight gives you is scale. You've been reading this place at flashlight range all night, 40 feet at a time. And 40 feet at a time, it was a bad piece of ground. In the light, it runs as far as you can see in both directions along the bluff. It goes north and it goes south, and it doesn't end where you can see it end. Roughly 1.5 miles of what used to be the edge of Anchorage has moved, and it went out toward the water. That's the shape of it. And it's the thing you couldn't understand last night. The bluff didn't fall down. It slid out. The ground broke off in enormous blocks and went west toward Nick Arm. And the blocks tipped and dropped and rode out on top of something underneath them. Way out at the far edge, near the water, there's a low ridge of pushed-up mud and blocks and snow. That's where it stopped. Some of those houses are hundreds of feet from where they were built. Now the details. And the details are what get you. The blocks are like a broken plate somebody slid apart. Some almost level. Some tipped over on an edge at 30 and 40 degrees with the grass and snow still on top. Between them are trenches. Deep ones. With raw, wet, blue-gray clay in the sides. That clay is the reason, and nobody standing here knows that yet. There are trees standing at every angle, with their roots still in their own dirt, and birches lying flat across the tops of ridges. There's more snow than you'd expect, because it was all still down, and the white makes the shapes read hard against the dirt. That's what makes it look like the pictures. In every photograph anybody ever takes of this. It's the snow that makes it legible. And in among all of that, the houses, you count what you can see and then you stop counting, because it isn't a number that helps. Some are down and broken up. Some are intact and tilted. There's one on its side. There's one wedged in a trench with the roof at ground level. So you're looking down at shingles. And there's one out about halfway, sitting level and square, and undamaged in a place where there was never a lot, with a curtain visible in the front window and the front door shut. Now, the belongings. This is the part nobody who wasn't here can prepare for. And it's the part that finally does it to you. There's stuff everywhere. Not wreckage. Wreckage is anonymous, and you can handle wreckage. It's the ordinary things. Out on the snow, right side up. A chest of drawers standing upright in the middle of open ground with 2 drawers out. A bedspread, flat, laid out perfectly on the dirt, like somebody made a bed there. Toys, a tricycle, books, a lot of books, pages open, riffling in the wind off the inlet. Somebody's laundry on a line still up between 2 poles, over a trench that wasn't there yesterday, frozen stiff and moving as one piece. You look at a kitchen curtain lying across a block of clay, and you think about a woman picking that fabric out at a store on 4th Avenue. And that's the thought that finally takes your legs out. You sit down in the snow. Your mother stands next to you and doesn't say anything, and doesn't try to get you up. Your neighbor comes past a minute later and stops. She's still in the man's coat with the sleeves turned back, and she's got the flashlight in her hand out of habit. In daylight. Switched off. She doesn't ask if you're all right. She looks out at it for a second, and then she says, "The ground out there is going to be soft for a while, and to stay off it in those shoes." Then she goes on. That's the last thing she ever says to you. Her family goes to relatives in Fairbanks in April, and you don't see her again. Now the people, they're out there, all over it, in the morning light. Dozens of them, moving very slowly across the blocks. And you can tell exactly what each one is doing from 100 yards away. Some are looking for people. There aren't many of those left by morning. The ones who could be found were found in the night. Most are looking for their own house. That's the real work of this morning, and it's stranger than it sounds. People standing on high pieces of ground turning in circles, trying to line up a landmark that's still where it belongs, against a landmark that isn't, and figure out which of these tilted objects is theirs. You watch a man do it for 10 minutes. He walks out, stops, turns around, comes back, goes a different direction. He isn't distressed. He's methodical. He's a man trying to solve a problem. Then you find your house. Your father finds it. Actually, and he does it the way that man did. From a piece of high ground, by lining up 2 things. He points and says that's it. It's about 300 feet out and down. Tilted maybe 20 degrees to the north. And it's come apart along one corner where the ground under it split. It didn't ride out to the far edge. It went down and over and stopped early. And it's sitting there with the roof on it. The window that faces the water is unbroken. Your mother looks at that for a while. Then she says the thing everybody in Anchorage says at some point in the next 3 days, and that nobody ever plans to say. She says we were all out of it. That's what she's got. 3 of you were out of that house at 5:36 in the afternoon, and 1 was at work, and 1 was on 4th Avenue. And the house is down there at 20 degrees. And everybody who lives in it is standing up here on the grass. Now the wider thing, and it comes to you in pieces over the morning, as people come up from the east with news. 9. That's the number for Anchorage. 9 people died in this city. 45,000 people. The 2nd largest earthquake ever recorded. 4.5 minutes. A block of downtown, 10 feet down. A school split in half, a six-story building flat, and a mile and a half of neighborhood on its way to the inlet. 9. You'll hear that number for the rest of your life, and it will never once sit right. The rest of Alaska is a different number, and it's much bigger, and almost all of it is water, and almost none of it is here. You'll learn over the next weeks what happened on the coast, the wave at Valdez, the waterfront at Seward burning, the village out on the Sound, and the number of people in it, and what that number was as a fraction of everybody who lived there. But that's the coast. Here, on a Saturday morning, what you have is a wrecked city with almost everybody in it alive. And it doesn't balance. And nobody has anywhere to put it. You sit in the snow on the edge of Turnagain Heights and look down at your own house lying at an angle 300 feet away. And it's a beautiful, clear, cold morning, and the mountains across the inlet are pink, and everybody you have is standing within 10 feet of you. Here's what it was. It happened at 36 minutes past 5 in the afternoon on Friday, March 27th, 1964. The break started under Prince William Sound, about 75 miles east of Anchorage, where one piece of the Earth's crust is sliding underneath another one. The shaking ran about 4.5 minutes. They measured it and argued about it, and eventually settled on magnitude 9.2, which makes it the largest earthquake ever recorded in North America, and the second largest ever recorded anywhere on this planet. Around 130 people died across Alaska and down the west coast. Most of them died in water, in the coastal towns and villages, and some as far away as Oregon and California. 9 of them were in Anchorage. The ground under Turnagain Heights failed because of a layer of clay underneath it. That clay was sensitive to shaking, and the shaking went on and on, cycle after cycle, and the clay lost its strength, and the ground on top slid out on it toward the inlet. The duration is the part that mattered. It took a long time to work that clay loose, and this earthquake had a long time. Scientists came to Alaska that spring and spent years on this, and what they learned here fed into the understanding of how these big subduction earthquakes work. At a moment when the whole theory of moving plates was still being put together. That's the science, and that's all of it. Now, the part that stays. The aftershocks go on for months, thousands of them. The first day alone has a run of them big enough that anywhere else in the country, each one would be its own earthquake with its own headline. Anchorage sleeps in its clothes for weeks. Not a few people, most people. The water mains are broken across a lot of the city, so there are trucks with tanks on them, and lines, and everybody boils what they get. There's a public health push that spring, with shots and warnings, because a city with broken sewers and broken water lines is a city with a different kind of problem coming. And it doesn't come. And nobody outside Alaska ever hears about that part. You go back to school in a building that isn't your school. Your family lives somewhere else. And then somewhere else after that. And the thing everybody gets and keeps is very small. It's a hitch. Somebody in Anchorage is going to be talking mid-sentence, and they'll stop, and their eyes will go up to a light fixture, or a hanging plant, or a door standing open on its hinge, They'll look at it for 1 second, maybe two. Then they'll finish the sentence. They'll do that in 1965, and in 1975, and in 2004. People who moved to Arizona in 1968 will still be doing it in Arizona. Nobody teaches you that, and nobody can stop doing it. Now, the small things. Your feet are all right. It takes about 4 days, and there's some skin that comes off, and one toe that stays numb until summer. And that's the whole bill. And you got off light, and you know it. The flats are finished, both of them, split along the sole, wet through and thawed and frozen again. And your mother throws them out the next week and doesn't say one word about the boots by the back door. She never says it, not once, not ever, and you'd have taken it if she had. You go back downtown about 10 days later. The store on 4th is open. Not properly. There's plywood where the front window was, and a sign on it, and a generator running out back. And about a third of the stock on the shelves. Your manager is there. The display case is standing at the end of the counter. Somebody got it back up. The front pane is gone, and there's a piece of plywood cut to fit the frame. And the watches are back on the middle shelf in a straight row. And there are fewer of them than there used to be. You look at that case for a while. You're going to think about it at strange hours for the rest of your life. And not because of what it cost. Because, for about 90 seconds on the worst afternoon in the history of this state, while a building came apart over your head, your entire mind was working on how you'd explain a piece of broken glass to a man you liked. You never do explain it. He never brings it up. What he does is come around the counter and stand next to you and look at the case too. And then he finishes his sentence. He starts talking, and about 4 words in you realize you've heard this before. And you have. You heard the front of it at 36 minutes past 5 in the afternoon on the 27th of March with a watch in your hand. He's asking you to sweep up in the back before you go. That's what it was. That's what the last thing anybody said to you before the ground moved was going to be. He doesn't know he's doing it. He has no idea. He's a man asking a girl to sweep a floor. You stand there with your hand on the edge of a display case and you say, okay. And when you leave, you go out the front door, past the plywood. There's a new bell up there, same kind, brass, on a strip of spring steel. Because the old one came off the frame at some point that afternoon, and nobody ever found it. You go under it and out onto 4th Avenue. It rings twice on the way. 2 notes, close together. One going up